Hi, it's Kim from the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Today we're working on our quilt Blue Star, and I've got some information to share with you today and a little bit of a preview of what's to come. We'll be right back and get started. And welcome back to the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Hi, today we're working on Blue Star, and we've seen in a couple of the previous videos what the design is going to look like and how we're going to use these two blocks, you can barely see that one down there, to come together with this quilt design. So I had a few things I wanted to share with you today of my observations, and then show you a little bit about what I've done and what I've accomplished so far, and give you an opportunity to gather some information from that. So let's get started with this. First of all, I think on a previous video I showed you how I made the mock-ups, it's under here, of the squares that we're using, the blocks. And I do this so that I have a visual reminder every single time of what I'm doing. And that becomes very important with that busy block, Sister's Choice, because there are so many pieces that you're going to be putting together, even using the strip method. And you want to make sure that you get them correct. Now, yesterday I was in the studio for a little while, and I put together a sample of the Sister's Choice block. And you can see, let me take this down. You can see how similar the real block is from the sample. And it was very helpful because I had all those pieces laid out. I had the one strip here in the center, and then I had this 3 strips, and then I had the half square triangles and the white blocks and the blue blocks, and after a while it all becomes a jumble. So I laid them out the way they're supposed to go. I compared it to my sample to make sure I had everything in place, and then I started methodically sewing together the strip on the left, the next strip, the 3rd strip was already done, and then the other 2 strips. And then once they were all together, sewed all 5 strips together to get the block. Now, a couple of things I learned, and I wanted to share this with you. When I made the first half square triangles, I used the method where you cut a big square and you make all the seams and you cut it, and you end up with 8 half square triangles, which is what we need for each block. I think that in doing that, I did not do a very good job of pressing those seams open, and then I did not trim the blocks. So the next batch that I made sure to do that. I set the seams by pressing them the way they were sewn, and then I opened them up and pressed to the dark side. And then after I pressed it, making sure it was completely open, then I took a ruler, and actually I used this one because we're working with 3-inch squares, so this allowed that block to fit perfectly across that 3-inch wide ruler. And I used the 45-degree marking here to make sure that that lined up with the block, and then I trimmed it on any side that needed it. So now I know I have an exact 3-inch block with the seam running right through the middle. And you might ask me why that's important. Well, when we look at this block, and pardon the back of my head for a minute, there were a couple of areas where we are going to lose the point. Here, we're going to lose it, and maybe here. And what has happened is that block has gotten just a little bit twisted, more than likely when it was sewn together, because it wasn't trimmed. So I think that trimming these will do the trick as far as getting that not to happen as often moving forward. And then we had one here where it looks like it just got twisted just a little bit. It doesn't necessarily look like it's misshapen so much, but we just need to be really careful when we put them together. And the best way to do that is to make sure that every individual block we work with is exactly 3 inches square, and if they're the half square triangles, that line runs right through the middle. Again, the importance of making these blocks is to make sure that what you're doing is what you want the result to be, because I don't know about you, but I hate to rip things up and have to put them back together unless it's really, really necessary. And even when I was putting these together, I would pull them off to sew a strip together, and I would sew it and put it back down and think, well, where did I get this from? And I could look at the sample and see exactly where it needed to go. So again, I think that's going to be helpful. Also, when I had this block completed, and I was working on this one, but they were all in separate pieces, and I laid them out, the sister's quilt block, because it has so many pieces and so many seam allowances, looks so much bigger. I just knew I had made a cutting or calculation mistake. And how it turned out is once I got the seam allowances in, now they're equal sizes. So they are going to fit together fine. Now, even with these 2 little imperfections in here, I'm moving forward with it. More than likely, I'm going to use this in the quilt because they're very small issues. If you were going to submit this for a quilt show, then you may not want to. You may want to take those pieces and re-sew them or replace them with another square to make sure that you had perfect points. So one of the other things I wanted to talk about, I don't think we've covered in previous videos, is sewing these strips. And in this quilt design, we do have the strips here for the 5 and then here for the 3 on this. And I wanted to give you a little close-up of that. I don't think we've covered that in any of the videos, and I just wanted to go over it really quickly. So I'm going to turn my machine on, and we're going to run just a seam very quickly, a little sample to show you. And I think in the other videos I did mention to you that I have a little piece of chalkboard tape up here that I write on here exactly what my settings are. So every time I start this project, I can have exactly the same settings. And I'm going to put this camera right here so that we can see this. We've got these lined up exactly the same spot, and we're going to start here. Everything's lined up, our settings are correct. We don't need to tack that in place unless you feel the need for it. Checking our line up there. What's nice about having that 1/4-inch foot is that it keeps your fabric pretty well straight when you're sewing. So you just have to keep those 2 pieces together. And I don't typically use pins in the strips because if I forget they're there and it runs through with the needle, it's not so much that the needle will grab it or break it, or that the pin will break the needle. The problem that I have, and the reason I don't do it, is because the pin will grab there on the needle plate or in the presser foot and pull the fabric out of alignment, and you're going to end up stripping stitches out again. Coming up to the end. our blue strip is just probably ½ inch shorter, so we're just going to run right through the edge of that blue strip and end it in the white. And then that's all there is to sewing that strip. I unthreaded my needle there. As you can see, there it is. Now, if you're going to sew this again, for this we're going to need another blue strip. And I don't have a full blue strip, but I have a partial, and I wanted to show you that if you would indulge me just a moment. So let me thread my needle really quickly. I was watching a video, I think yesterday, and it was showing on some machine, and I don't even remember the brand, but how you have to thread the needle, and I thought, oh my gosh, it'd be easier just to thread it the old-fashioned way. Instead of having to go, you had to pull this down and position this and move this over and circle it round a couple of times, and it's just like, I do like mine because it's simple and fast to do. So what we've done is we've lined up the fabric up on the top. This is going to be the strip with 2 blues and a white. We've not pressed this one yet. We'll press it all at one time. If we were sewing over the seam, we'd need to press it first. But we just lined this up at the top where all 3 pieces are together across. They're about the same place, so that when we trim it, we should be trimming so we're cutting off all the selvages and we're not wasting any fabric. Okay, we're going to start sewing. Now, you can do this 2 ways. In this particular situation, I've started at the top where I started my last seam. You could also start from the other end, depending on how you want to position your fabric in your machine. Either way is fine. I think sometimes when you're sewing, for example, like a jelly roll quilt, where you're quickly sewing strips together to create a quilt top, they do recommend that you alternate your direction so that if your fabric skews a little bit, the next strip will skew it back in place. I think for 3 strips we're probably okay. We've got no pattern on this fabric, so if it does skew a little bit, as long as it's just a little bit, we should be fine. We won't even notice it. Coming up to the end. Notice I'm keeping that edge of my foot right there on the edge of the fabric all the way to the end. And by doing that and keeping our seams very consistent, we'll have much better luck when we sew it all together. We're coming to the end of the blue here. We're just going to sew off the blue and then stop. So just that simple, and you saw that in real time. We've put this strip with 3 fabrics together. Now we'll take this to the iron and we'll press to the blue. What we'll do is we'll set the seam first, then we'll fold it over and press. Let me turn it. We'll set the seam first, then we'll open it up and press the fabric to the blue, so it will look like this. And that's just that easy. Now, I wanted to talk a little bit about how many strips you need. And I was thinking about this last night because it kind of had me a bit flustered. I'd love to be able to sit down and tell you cut 4 strips of this size and 3 strips of this size and cut it such and such. But I'm not at this time designing this pattern. We're using an existing standard quilt pattern, Sister's Choice, and we're just alternating another block to go with it. So the other block is the only thing that I've even come close to designing. So I wanted to give you an update on how many strips I think we will need for the quilt top. And keep in mind that these are width of fabric strips, so your fabric could be skinnier than mine or wider than mine. You may have a miscut. You may get into it. You may not like your first batch of half square triangles and want to do it again. So these are rough preliminary quantities, and I would say they may change, but they probably will change. So keep that in mind. This is just a starting point. And I'm going to put this down below, but I think what we've come up with is that we're going to need 9, 10 3-inch blue strips, 16 3-inch white strips. I'm kind of calculating as I'm doing this. We're going to need 2 blue and 2 white of the 7-inch. And then we're going to need a 5.5-inch strip only from the white, and we should need 3 of those. Oh, I'm sorry, 8 of those. And right now, that's where I think I'm at for all of the blocks to make this a 5 square by 5 square by 5 square. So we have 13 of the Sister's Choice blocks, and I think it's 12 of the plain blocks right now. I think that ends up being, if you are perfect on all your cuts and your measurements, and the person at the fabric store cut your fabric correctly, you're at about a yard and 1/3 of the blue and probably about the same in the white. Now, I will tell you, I bought 5 yards of each because this does not account for any changes you make, for any mistakes you make, for any alterations you make. It also does not account for a border of any kind. So please don't go to the store and get a 1.5 yards and think you're going to have enough to finish this quilt. Buy some extra. And because especially if you pick a fabric, and I've got them right here, especially if you pick a fabric that you're not sure you can match, buy enough. Buy enough. I cannot say that enough times, because I did a quilt a few years ago where I thought I had enough, and it took more than I anticipated. And then when I went back to get more, nobody had it. I had to send to other states to get fabric, people I knew who could go in stores and pick up and ship things to me. So make sure you buy enough. We will be adjusting those quantities as we go on. And if there's somebody out there that wants to follow along with me and sew and tell me if I'm on the mark with my quantities or not, I would welcome that as well. Any help is always help. So to finalize our video for today, I want to tell you, cut carefully, sew carefully, and iron carefully. You could certainly do this quilt without doing that, but I think you're going to find that you're going to be redoing portions. And the goal here is to be able to pull this quilt together quickly and easily and without any frustrations, because quilting's supposed to be fun. We're creating something beautiful, but we're also supposed to be having fun with it. And when you have those situations, and I certainly have, where you sit down and say, oh, it's all wrong, and you get discouraged about it, that's not fun. We learn things, but it's not fun. So those are my points of the day. I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope that I've shared something that's helpful to you. If you like this video, please give us that thumbs up and like it. Leave us a comment. We'd love to hear from you. And most important of all, share it and subscribe to our channel, because the more subscribers we have, the more we are able to get here and give you more videos on new projects. I think new projects are very exciting to our viewers, and keeps us motivated if you're looking for a new project. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and sew another couple of blocks, And then I'll see you next time here at the Shamrock Quilt Studio. Have a great day.